Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the Military Teen Experience Report on Mental Health and Wellbeing by the National Military Family Association in Bloom. My name is Cherise St. I'm the Executive Director for the Military and Interstate Children's Compact Commission, and this is part of our monthly series on MIC3 Presents. Today, we do have a couple of guest speakers with us, presenters and panelists, and we're eager to share the information with you. However, I'd like to introduce our facilitator for today's event, Nicole Russell. She is the Government Relations Deputy Director for Children and Youth of the National Military Family Association. Her policy portfolio includes childcare, children's education, defense, resale, and voting issues. She represents NMFA as the co-chair of the Military Coalition's Personnel Committee. She also serves as the ex-officio organization member to the Military Interstate Compact, our commission, and she's also a board member of the Exchange Retiree Advisory Council. She has over 13 years of experience in governmental relations. Nicole has Capitol Hill federal lobbying, corporate communications, and nonprofit experience. She's also an active duty Marine spouse and has served in leadership roles on several different military nonprofit organizations in DC and Okinawa, Japan. Welcome, Nicole, and thanks for joining us today. I know you're going to introduce our panelist, but I did want to welcome everybody for being here today. Just a reminder to those who just joined, we ask that you just mute your microphones if possible. This will help us keep the background noise to a minimum. And then if you can also hold your questions until after the presentations. We'd like our guest speakers today to share the information first. We will have a Q&A session just after that where you can clarify information or ask your questions in the chat. So please hold your questions to the end. And if you have any concerns or issues, please just put it in the chat and staff will be able to assist you then. But I know that Nicole, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Cherise. Welcome, everyone. As she said, I'm Nicole Russell. I'm the Deputy Director of Government Relations for the National Military Family Association. I'm very passionate about military children's education policy, and I cover all things that have to do with our military child. So as Cherise said, I am an active duty spouse. My husband is a Marine, and we are stationed in the Northern Virginia area. I'm also a mom to a baby girl who will be starting school, I'm sure, before I know it. So I'll kick it off. Many of you are familiar with NMFA and how we helped draft the Interstate Compact, but you might not know we've been supporting military children of all branches and all ranks for more than 50 years. So here's a short video that shows you a little bit about what we're about.
Being in the military is tough. You're dealing with deployments, your family's moving every 2 to 3 years, and sometimes you're dealing with a service member's injury. And it's not just the service member who's affected, it's every member of the military family. Since 1969, the National Military Family Association has been providing fierce advocacy for America's military families. We also have programs to support military families every step of the way throughout their military life. When a family is well supported, the service member can focus on the mission at hand.
Together, we're stronger.
Together, we're stronger.
Together, we're stronger.
Together, we are stronger.
Thank you. So as you can see at NMFA, we know that military kids serve too. And we've been supporting them through our bold advocacy, innovative programs like our Operation Purple Kids Camps, and now our original research. Next slide, please. Next slide. Great. So we host Operation Purple Kids Camps family retreats for those recently experiencing a deployment, and healing adventures camps for the wounded, ill, and injured. Our applications for our summer Operation Purple Kids camps open on February 15th. So check out the link in the chat and be sure to share that with your community. Next slide, please. Also want to mention our military spouse scholarships. These are for those pursuing higher education, licensure and certifications, and even small business startup costs. These applications are accepted on a rolling basis. So if you are someone who can contact and plug into that military spouse network, please spread the word. And I wanted to also mention that in 2020 and 2021, we responded to a huge demand for childcare with an unprecedented number of school-age kids learning remotely and virtually. We did this through our childcare fee relief program. So if anyone has any questions related to childcare, that before and after care, please reach out to us through our website. Next slide, please. Great, so we know military kids are far more likely to want to serve the military than their civilian peers. This is the future force we're talking about. So we knew when we stood up our new research and insights department last year, we needed to find out more about our older military teens, teenagers. In 2021, we launched the first year of our military teen experience survey with the kids at Bloom, Empowering the Military Teen. And even being a part of this community day in and day out, some of the results, frankly, just blew us away. So with that, I would like to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Crystal Lewis, Director of Research and Insights at NMFA, to give us a high-level analysis of those survey results. I was lucky enough to meet Dr. Lewis when we were both stationed in Okinawa, Japan. She's probably one of the most impressive people I've ever met. She's a published author. She has worked in higher ed over 15 years, teaching, advising, and designing curricula. She has 10 years of experience as a grant and proposal writer for initiatives like work programs for the disabled and youth educational programming. She's also a Navy spouse and mom to 2 school-aged kids. Later, we'll hear from Elena Ashburn, co-founder of Bloom, Empowering the Military Teen, to share her personal story and perspective on being a military teen. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss these groundbreaking findings. Dr. Lewis, take it away.
Nicole, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. First and foremost, I just want to say that I am a military spouse. We're a Navy family. We're stationed in San Diego, California. I have 2 military kids and we move every 2 years. So we are living the lifestyle. So not only is this really important for me professionally in my work, but it's really important to me as, personally, because this is my community and my lifestyle. So as Nicole mentioned, in 2021, NMFA launched the Research and Insights Department to really give a voice to our military families in a credible and valid way. We included credible research in all of our programs and all of our surveys, and that's the primary way we collected data throughout the year. And we heard from 25,000 unique military families in 2021. That really just blew me away, the number of families that NMFA is in contact with each year. And in our first year, our research was cited by the White House in their Joining Forces report, and also was accepted in a national academic conference, the National Council on Family Relations. So that was a really proud moment for both of those, really proud moments for NMFA and our Research and Insights Department. Next slide, please. This is kind of the basic process of research, but it's absolutely the one that NMFA follows. So first we identify a research problem, and in this case it was, how are our military teens doing? When we disseminated our teen survey, that was really our research question. We conducted a review of literature in tandem with Bloom. They were really integral in helping us and going through that process, learning, but also being an active partner. And like I said, the purpose of this was really to get a handle on how are our teens doing? What is their mental health forecast? What does their food insecurity situation look like? Are they food insecure or are they not? We collected data through the survey that we disseminated in partnership with Bloom. We analyzed it using SPSS. And I want to shout out to my team right now, Aspen and Meredith, who were very integral in this process. Meredith wrote syntax in SPSS, and Aspen was our survey extraordinaire. And then when we got that back, we were able to do some high-level analysis and look at some of the correlations between the variables. Was mental health related to food insecurity? Was mental health related to the number of deployments our military kids were going through? And this was really helpful, for us to not only present credible research and valid research, as I said, but also to make sure that this high-level research is going into the hands of our decision makers, rather than conducting just a quick poll and then putting that into the hands of our decision makers. Next slide, please. So again, as I mentioned, in all of the research that NMFA conducted this year, we used validated instruments. What are validated instruments? They are just tools that measure what they're designed to measure. So researchers repeatedly test instruments using analysis and correlation tests until that instrument is deemed valid. So we really wanted to elevate what we were doing. So we made sure that each and every survey that we disseminated had at least one validated instrument inside. As far as the teen research, we used two. We used the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale to measure the mental well-being of our military teens, and we used the USDA short form to measure the food insecurity of our military teens. Again, not only did this give us, credible and valid results, but it also allowed us to really do an apples to apples comparison. So for example, if the USDA, which they do, they measure food insecurity in civilian children, we are able to look at that statistic and compare military children to civilian children. Next slide, please. So before we get to our teen research, I wanted to give kind of a holistic overview of how our military families are doing in light of the pandemic. We all know that military families are struggling before the pandemic hit. We know the unique challenges of moving every 2 to 3 years, deployments, reintegration, changing schools. We know all of this exists, unemployment, underemployment, but really how are our families doing during the pandemic? So, there's a QR code on the bottom of this slide. If you take your phone out, and I promise I won't think that you're being rude, you can open the camera app and connect with the QR code that way. I learned the hard way that you cannot screenshot the slide and then try to use it later. It won't work. But you can also visit our website, and the link is in the chat if the QR code isn't for you. So again, we looked at the impacts of COVID-19, and really what we wanted to measure were how has COVID-19 impacted our military families' access to childcare? How has it impacted their employment, particularly the spouse? And how has it impacted their overall income? And we talked to over 4,000 families for this study. And to give you an idea of who we talked to, 80% of the respondents were enlisted, and 42% were from military families of color. And we learned that 59% of respondents reported decreased income or lost income, and that 56% of military spouses had to take a break from their goals, whether that was school or a certification program, or an entrepreneurial goal. We also found that 49% had lost or had reduced access to childcare. So as you can see, this was like the very first thing that we looked at to kind of get a holistic view, as I mentioned, of the military family and how they were doing in this pandemic. Next slide, please. And then we really honed in on ranks E1 through E6, as those were primarily the respondents from the COVID-19 study, or as I mentioned, 80% were enlisted. So then we really took a closer look at hunger in the military. And for this study, we heard from over 11,000 service members, ranks E1 through E6. And we found that 14% said that they were food insecure. And what was really fascinating was when I compared this to food insecurity in civilian families, it was very similar using the USDA data that they release on an annual basis. They haven't released their 21 data. It usually comes out in September if you're interested in looking for that. But again, this was really important as we could have an apples to apples comparison because we used the USDA short form in this study. What was really astounding to me in this particular research or this data set was that of the 14% of active duty service member families who said that they were food insecure, 12% of them were currently deployed. So if this paints any sort of picture, we think about the active duty military service member, they're deployed, they're away from their family, and yet they're not focused perhaps on the mission at hand. They're thinking about their family back at home and where they're going to get their next meal, or do they have enough food? And so that was really surprising to me that the majority of those who were food insecure were also deployed. Next slide, please. So this is what we're here to really talk about and focus on is our military teens. So if you could answer the poll about if there are military teens in your life that you serve or that you're connected to, what are the military teens talking to you about? Are their future plans to serve, their well-being, their connectedness, or concerns about food insecurity or other issues at home, if any? Okay, thank you. So NMFA and Bloom collaborated to survey our military teen community. We wanted to know, how are our military teens doing? We surveyed over 2,000 military teens, again, using the Warwick-Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale and the USDA short form to measure food insecurity. And we were really just astounded by what we found. So as far as food insecurity, this was really comparable to what I just showed you with our adults, ranks E1 through E6. Even though the numbers here look starkly different, these were the responses for each particular question we asked in the USDA short form. And again, if you want to link to the full report or the short one-page report, you can use your phone to scan the QR code, or the link is in the chat. Thank you, Charisse. 36% of our military teens were concerned about food scarcity, which is different than food insecurity. 28% reported having run out of food before, and 7.5% said that this happened often. None of this sat well with us. This didn't make us feel good. No one wants to hear that our military teens are struggling with food insecurity, but it's one of the biggest things that we learned from the military teen experience survey in collaboration with Bloom. Next slide, please. I also wanted to mention on that last slide that we did some high-level correlations with food insecurity, and that there were some very significantly correlated variables here. So food insecurity was really significantly related to plans to serve in the future, which we found really surprising. So if a teen is in a military family and they're experiencing food insecurity, we were kind of surprised to see that they were planning to serve in the future and go down that same path. And of course, food insecurity and mental well-being were significantly related to each other. So when we ran the correlations on those two variables, military teens who reported greater food insecurity generally reported lower mental well-being. And again, these aren't shocking correlations, but the fact that we found them and that they were statistically significant really spoke to us. And then this may be the most significant finding of all. 87% of our military teens who responded to our military teen experience survey reported low to moderate mental well-being. I wish that any of us felt surprised by this statistic, but being homeschooled or having remote instruction, being isolated from friends and family, and just trying to get through the pandemic, this really wasn't a surprise to us. And we also did some correlations here to look at mental well-being and the number of deployments. Those were significantly related. So teens who reported a higher number of deployments and separations reported a lower mental well-being score. And also, we asked our teens about abuse, various kinds of abuse, child abuse, domestic abuse in their home, or dating violence. And mental well-being was also significantly related to many different experiences of violence and abuse, which again is not a surprise, but it was important that we found that those two variables were statistically significantly related to each other. So military teens who reported never experiencing any types of violence or abuse had greater mental well-being. So we did look at a large number of, the number of variables and correlated them to each other to really figure out if they were related. And I'm going to introduce Elena from Bloom. She is an amazing young woman. She is the co-founder of Bloom Empowering the Military Teen, along with Matthew O, who is not with us today. He's the other co-founder of Bloom. I worked with Elena and Matthew for 9 months. They were very invested and involved in this research. They offered questions when we met with Purdue to, get input and look at really editing our questions for clarity. They were right there every step of the way. And I'm just so impressed with these two kids these two young adults. And I just want to introduce Elena and then have her talk about the next slide, which is also a very startling statistic. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction, Dr. Lewis. I am Elena Ashburn. I'm 18. I'm a high school senior. And as Crystal mentioned, I am one of the co-founders of Bloom Empowering the Military Teen. Working on this research with the NMFA team for the last, 9 months, it was absolutely an incredible experience. And it taught me a lot about not only the research process, but my community. As an active duty military brat myself, I've gotten to live the lifestyle. I know what it's like, and I personally don't think I could serve, which is why this statistic in particularly, just really blew me away. And that's that 65% of our military teens reported that they plan to serve in the future, which is absolutely incredible. That's a way over the majority. And this also raises a couple questions, because as we've seen in past statistics that Dr. Lewis has mentioned, they're not doing okay. The military teen community is not, they're struggling with their mental health. They're struggling with food insecurity. How can they support the mission if they are struggling with all of these other issues? Which is why we really need to focus on remedying and fixing the food insecurity rates that we see, as well as the low mental well-being scores, in order to ensure that these military teens are going to enter the forces and be able to support the mission. Next slide, please. As I said before, my name is Elena, and I am the co-founder of Bloom Empowering the Military Teen. As an active duty Army brat, my father served for over 25 years, so I've lived the military lifestyle my entire life. I started Bloom with my best friend Matthew O, who Crystal mentioned, in 2020, which was our sophomore year of high school after we had a particularly hard move. We had met in Carlisle, Pennsylvania at the U.S. Army War College. I don't know if there's any other War College people here, but and we quickly found an amazing group of friends and great extracurriculars, and really found like we had a community and a home at Carlisle. But unfortunately, it is an extremely short duty station because it's a war college, so it's only 10 months. So it was very, very quick, and we had to leave that summer. As well as all of our other military brat friends. I ended up moving to Southcom in Miami, and he moved to South Korea at Camp Humphreys. And we both really struggled with this move. Matthew had a variety of issues transferring and adapting to his new overseas home and school. I struggled a different way. I struggled with my mental health, and it was a long journey that eventually got me reaching out for help. And that's why I think that the mental health statistics are so important that we found in our research. But as I was going through this, I was really frustrated because I knew that my struggles are ones that other military brats faced. So I sort of posed this question to Matthew: how can we take these two things that we're struggling with and use them to help other kids like us? So that was the origin story for Bloom. We decided that we wanted to help other military teens know that they weren't alone in their struggles. It went through a bunch of different iterations before we decided on creating the website, bloommilitaryteens.org, where military teens could post articles about military life, and we could give them a platform to express themselves. And on April 10th, 2020, we launched the website. But it's been nearly 2 years since then, and it has grown far beyond a blog. With our team of over 30 military teens from all different branches and areas of the world, we've posted over 185 articles on our blog. Our social media presence has grown to reach thousands of people. We've been featured in publications like People Magazine, the Department of Defense, Military Times, and we've collaborated with organizations like Blue Star Families, MSEC, and of course, NMFA, who we did the Military Teen Experience report with last year. And as Dr. Lewis had mentioned, this research is groundbreaking in a ton of ways, but especially because so many military teens from Bloom were involved in this process. So many members from across the globe helped write questions, review questions, edit questions for the survey. NMFA not only allowed us, but encouraged us to get involved with every aspect of the study, from coming up with the questions to suggesting possible correlations we could run, to announcing the results, to now a community-based guide that we're working on based on these results that was written almost entirely by military teens. In terms of highlights from the results of the research, as I mentioned, I thought the mental well-being findings were particularly important, but not extremely surprising. As a military teen, we often hear stories or experience struggles ourselves with mental health and well-being, and I'm no exception. I've talked a lot about struggling with mental health and the different factors that go into that. One of those factors that I would really like to talk about today is housing insecurity, especially in relation to the current housing market crisis. Because my family struggled with housing insecurity last summer. If you aren't aware, there has been a crazy, crazy thing going on in the housing market. It's been a boom, largely attributed to COVID-19 and lower mortgage rates, and it has led to increased prices and low supply. And this is affecting our military community really, really badly because we often move. It's really hard when you're switching places and you're PCSing to a new place, and the housing market is just so crazy that there's nothing available for your family to live in. My family has lived in the Fort Lauderdale area of Florida since the summer of 2019. You can head to the next slide. Sorry. And even pre-pandemic, we struggled to find housing. We actually lived in a camping trailer from June until early September because we could not find a house to rent or buy at all. But we finally did in early September of 2019, and that was our refuge. We spent countless hours in the backyard, especially once the pandemic hit. It really was our little shelter because not only did a pandemic blow our way, but several hurricanes and so many amazing memories. But in April of 2021, our landlord called my parents to inform us that he would not renew our lease, which would expire at the end of August, because he was selling our house. The housing market in South Florida was particularly hot, with properties being bought above the asking price, sight unseen within days of being listed. We still had about a year left at our current duty station, so we needed to find a new house quickly in a market that was extremely unkind to buyers and renters. We immediately started looking for a new house in April, but everything available was either far too expensive, far too small for our family of 5 plus a dog, and far away from where we needed to be, or a mix of all three. We put offers on several houses, but were constantly outbid by hundreds or even thousands of dollars. And this was for rental properties. Throughout this whole process, we were just trying to remain within or close to our BAH, which is our basic allowance for housing, that many military families are given to, help them find housing in their area, but that it was an impossible feat. Our basic housing allowance, which is supposed to cover about 95% of housing costs, only covered 65% or less of every single property that we were looking into. And my parents did not want to drain their savings to be able to find us housing, but it was the reality of the situation. All of that spring and into the summer of 2021, my family searched for a place to live. And as the date of our lease expiration grew near, we grew more frantic. In mid-July, I actually published an article on Bloom called "We Need a Home" about my family's experience in the housing market. At the time of the publication of that article, my dad had reserved a spot in an RV park, and we were entirely planning on moving into a 25, 30-foot trailer for our family of 5 plus a dog for 11 months because we had no other option. And in my article, I called on the DoD to support military families during this housing crisis by raising the BAH and funding local moves, because local moves in this situation aren't funded. They're Diddy, but you have to pay for them yourself. I was worried not only for my family, but for a lot of the younger military families in my community, who might not have had the resources or experience that my family had. And I was worried for our incoming families. We had several stuck in Airbnbs and hotel rooms for months. And I was worried for many families of ours who were in camping trailers because we were in the middle of hurricane season. It's not really a safe place to be in the middle of South Florida in hurricane season. Thankfully, a couple days before our lease expired, we were able to enter a new lease in a different house, that it's a lot smaller considering that we have only 6 people, and we have 6 people now in our house. And it is over $1,000 over our BAH. And it puts us in a different school zone. So we actually have to use our old address, and we registered under our old information to ensure that my brothers and I don't have to change schools again. But that's, it's kind of running a risk there, because if our school for some reason needs to go to our house, let's say a social worker needs to visit, we have been found out and we'll have to change schools. I'm very, very grateful though, besides this, to have a roof over my head. It was an extremely unnerving time to not know, like, oh my God, we might like not have a house. It was a very anxiety inducing time. But that does not, just because my worry is over for my family at the time, does not mean I'm not still worried for the other military families in our community who are going through this housing crisis. The DoD did issue temporary BAH increases for certain areas, but my area of South Florida, despite some areas having rent increases of over 30%, we were not issued any relief. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, we got no temporary BAH increase. And this is not just a South Florida issue. This is an issue across the nation. Service members are being displaced and faced with housing insecurity, from Kentucky to Michigan to Washington. The new 2022 BAH increases from the DoD are very encouraging, but I challenge them to do more, because no service member should have to deal with housing insecurity. How can they focus on supporting the mission if they don't even have a roof over their head? The United States spends more money on its military than any country in the world. And I think it is rational to ask that they ensure that each one of their service members has a roof over their head and a place to live. Because the men and women who serve our military go above and beyond for this country, leaving their families, deploying into harm's way within a moment's notice. The very least we can do is to ensure that they have a place to live. If you're interested about learning more about my experience with the housing market, I will drop a link in the chat to that article. You can find Bloom at bloommilitaryteens.org. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Elena, so much for sharing your personal experience. And you're just amazing. I can't say that enough times. And you know that I genuinely love working with you, and as does everyone at NMFA. And everyone on this call can hear that our work is not done. So I'm pleased to announce that we'll be fielding the Year 2 Military Teen Experience Survey on February 1st. I would love if you could share with your networks. It is critical that we listen to our military teen community and understand the unique struggles that they're experiencing. And now I'll pass it over to Nicole.
Great. Thank you, Crystal and Elena, for explaining everything about the Military Teen Experience Report and, of course, the challenges that many of our teens are still going through. Thank you so much, Elena. You are certainly a leader for all military teens, and we can't wait to see what the future brings for you. So with that, we will turn it over for some Q&A. I also want to make sure that if anyone has any questions about military family policy when it comes to healthcare, housing, education, everything that touches this community's lives, we advocate for these issues, all of them. So please visit us at militaryfamily.org. You can also reach out to Crystal or I for any particular questions related to this report. So we welcome your questions, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. I just put in the chat that you can, if you have any questions, just put them in the chat and we'll be sure to either call them out or we can call on you if you're willing to speak. Are there any questions at this time for our panelists? There are comments in there. I saw a couple in there that express empathy of similar issues or situations, and thank you for your experience. I know our commissioner from Idaho, Joel Wilson, expressed appreciation for your message, Elena, and said thank you for sharing your story. Lorena Hagenbart from I'm sorry, I don't know where you are from, Lorena, said she's experienced this during the Desert Storm as troops were moved to Fort Campbell. So thank you again for sharing that experience. But if there's any clarifications or questions, oh, here you go. Commissioner from Virginia, Dan Dunham. Question for Elena, does your leadership team entertain requests to speak on issues that teens have?
That's a great question. I've also gotten a couple personal mess DMs on the chat with similar questions. So our leadership team does accept applications for any teens that want to submit writing. We are also currently looking at expanding our team. Our applications are live. If you would like to have any of the military teens from Bloom come talk to perhaps a commission or just present anything, you can email us at the email on our website. But I also wanted to see, I saw a bunch of messages about how other teens can join Bloom, which is great. I love to hear that. Head on over to our website, bloommilitaryteens.org. We're currently fielding applications for several positions, including blog writers. If this teen in your life may not want to submit on a regular basis, they can also give us a one-off submission. We also accept artwork and all other forms of media. We really just want to give a place for everyone in the military teen community to have their voice heard, because we're not often the section of the military community that gets a lot of attention. We're not like the cute little kids with like little flags when our parents come home from deployment, like on all the posters. That's not us. But we wanted to make a space for those kids because we're here and we're here to stay for as long as we have a military. There are going to be military teens, right? Thank you so much for those putting the links in the chat. You are the best. Oh, also, feel free for any of those military teens to fill out our survey that's coming out on February 1st, 2022. It's a great way for them to, know that their voice is being heard in their community, because this is going to be included in our reports and our guides. Like, this is important answers that they're giving us to help us shape the future for them and make sure that we solve a lot of these issues that we're seeing.
And to Elena's point, we will make sure that you all receive that link on February 1st to the survey. We certainly would want you to share it with your community, share it far and wide, so that we get as many military teen responses as we can. The more people respond, the better data that we have to compile, to share, to spread the message about what our military teens are experiencing.
No, thank you very much for responding to those questions, Elena. I put a whole bunch of links in there, but there is a email if you are interested in having the Bloom team speak, Elena or her colleagues speak to your group. You can email them at bloommilitaryKid@gmail.org. You can also find this, as she mentioned, on their website. Again, there's just comments about just expressing appreciation for your perspective, because it's something that I think folks have not heard in the past. And certainly I've never heard that. And that's why I was fascinated to hear about your story and what NMFA was doing, because I thought, again, it really highlighted an area that folks hadn't thought of or hadn't been reported on in the past. Any other questions for our panelists or questions regarding the study? Again, oh, yes, go ahead, Nicole.
Oh, I was just going to say, Charisse, I saw Lucy Green's chat. I thought this was an interesting, detail. She's wondering, it might be interesting to explore the characteristics of families that inspire, the determination to serve in our nation's armed forces. So I thought that was, something absolutely, that I think would be worthwhile to explore.
I have a question for perhaps Crystal. Maybe this is Crystal and Elena. I know you mentioned the next reiteration of the survey is being launched on the 1st. How is it different from the first one? Are there issues in there that will be addressed or explored further?
So I think one of our biggest goals is to look at the mental well-being, the food insecurity compared to the previous year. So hopefully as the pandemic transitions into an endemic, the teens will start to do better, but we just don't know until we ask. So our hope is that the mental well-being scores improve and that the food insecurity scores are lower. But we really want to compare year-to-year data, but there are new elements that we will be asking teens. We want to know if they're registered to vote, if they voted before, if they plan to vote in the future. We also want to ask them about their work experience and know if they're working to contribute to the family's income or if they're working for their own spending money. If they are working to contribute to the family's income, is it because of food insecurity? So those are some of the new elements and the new variables that we'll be measuring this year. But again, really the big thing is to find out, are our teens doing better or not?
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Crystal. I think that's very helpful. Again, for everyone, we will be sharing. Oh, there's a question here from Raleigh Sampson. Have you considered asking AMSEC to share the survey with their student-to-student groups in order to engage more teens? The Navy has a similar program, and that Raleigh will be sharing this with their district's S2S programs.
Absolutely. We work really closely with MSEC. They are very close partners of ours. We will be sharing this survey with them and they will disperse to their teams. And we also work very closely with all the services and we'll be making sure that they have the survey and can send it down to all their CYS, their child and youth services, as well as the school districts. And we're going to make sure DODEA also has access to this survey because they say roughly 80% of military children attend public schools, but there's that 20%, right, that maybe attend DODEA, private schools, parochial schools, homeschooling. So we want to make sure that we touch on those populations as well.
Thank you, Nicole, for answering that. I just want to take one last call for questions, if there's any. Okay, we are going to wrap it up. Again, I wanted to thank our speakers, Elena, Dr. Lewis, and Nicole for being present today and sharing this information. It's been such a great collaboration to hear the information and really hear about a perspective we've never heard of before. So thank you again for being here today. Also to our attendees, again, as was mentioned earlier, this webinar will be shared, the recording as well as the information on the next reiteration of the NMFA survey, which we encourage you to share widely with your stakeholders. And with that, I wanted to remind everybody, we do have next month's webinar scheduled. It's MSEC School Quest program. It's a resource, an interactive tool that's designed to support highly mobile families and students as they're transferring. And it's an online tool for both schools and parents. So again, join us next month. We'll put the link in the chat. And if you have any other questions, be sure to contact us. But again, thank you again for attending. We wish you the best for the rest of your day and for the rest of the week. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.